right. We are live, and we'll just kind of hang out for a minute, let it all populate.
Fantastic.
I have these beautiful title screens that George made that I always forget to
Oh,
to use because we're also going to be possibly collaborating on doing some like chiptune intro themes for my channel. So I think once I have those to put over the little title screens, I will be able to like put that live and like have it sit for a minute and let everybody come hang out. But I keep forgetting to do it. It's gonna be cool though. Here I'll pop the stream on to them so we can all just take a look. So that's the first one. It's a little Game Boy in front of a
oh
campfire,
yes, lovely. That's
and
really cool.
yeah, because
That's
I
that's George's, is it? Is that
yeah
George's?
I
Oh, it's lovely.
seeing all the pixel art through Instagram stories, I was like, hey, could I commission maybe some pixel art? And then I kind of said I'd like the idea to be like it's like an NES game and it's like a title screen. And so I thought I was just going to get one. And then George, being the loveliest human, made 4 for me.
Oh,
So then we have Game Boy in the library. Um,
it's so cute.
which is so adorable, and just the little details like the NES on the shelf in the back, and there's a little question box, and
Oh
um,
yes, yes, I see. How
really
lovely.
cute. And
That
then the
is really cute.
third one, third one is the little Game Boy and me waving on a bridge, and I just
Oh, look at
adore all of
that.
these. Yeah, I should add a countdown timer.
That's really nice. I think this
Um,
should be a game. This is really awesome.
I know I want to play these games. And then the last one is I'm hanging out with the Game Boy by the fire and saying "You bleep so beautifully," and they're the best.
They are absolutely wonderful. How lovely.
Oh yeah, commissioning George for book covers would be the
Oh,
coolest idea.
please. That would be brilliant.
I love that idea. Let's all keep George in mind for that. Because who doesn't want to pay our friends to be wonderful and do what they do?
Just
Anyway,
keep
now
them
that
on the
some
thing for
folks are arriving, welcome Tim Summers to the
Hello.
Kudomusicology Ludomusicology Literature Review stream. I'm your host, Musicologess, also Dana. So Tim, how did we meet?
Yeah.
I don't. I'm trying to remember
I
exactly.
can't remember.
It feels like you've just always been here.
Well, I can remember one of the first projects that we worked on together was you wrote an absolutely brilliant article for a journal issue that I was co-editing with Mark Sweeney and Michiel Camp, which is your Tetris
Oh,
article,
that's
which
right.
is brilliant. Do you want to tell the lovely people
That
about your
was so. Yeah,
article?
I like many grad students. I had been submitting abstracts to conferences and rejection after rejection after rejection, and then suddenly I got 4 acceptances, like in a row for the same semester. So my very first one was NACVGM, and that was January because it was back when we were doing it over Martin Luther King weekend. So that was my Bach that have turned into my Bach paper, and
Oh yes,
then which eventually got published in a Bach journal, which is just so wild.
it's
But
great. It's a super paper too. It's a very very good
I was
article.
so happy to see where that one ended up, and it took a long time to get there. But when I finally published it, it turned out good. And then the second one, because I also had it in my head, you don't give the same paper twice. How? Because again, grad student brain, I was like, you have to do different things. And so the second thing was Ludo. And it was in Chichester that year, and which I was very excited about because I'm a big Call the Midwife fan, and they always talk about they have the Anglican convent that the midwives work in, and they have like their mother house is in Chichester, so they would talk about it all the time.
That's interesting.
So like if one of the nuns fell sick, she would go like to the mother house to recuperate or something. So that was my main exposure to Chichester, which was the loveliest town. I woke up really early on like the Saturday or Sunday and just wandered around the walls of the city. I did the city wall walk myself, and
Very
just
good.
with cup of coffee in hand, and just sort of watched everything waking up, and it was so cool. But
I'm
anyway,
glad you had a nice
I
time.
gave
Yeah.
the Tetris paper there, which had come out of like a seminar paper that I had written. And then you all said, "Hey, would you like to put this in this issue of the journal?" And that was really exciting.
It was super. It has the best title. One of the best titles I think that there's never been topped in terms of game music scholarship, which is "From Russia with Fun,"
Yeah, and
and it was
that was a tagline from them, so I didn't
it
even that
was
wasn't even my own cleverness.
it was very good. It was very good. It's a great paper. It's a superb article, and so I think that was probably one of the things that we worked on. We've just been sort of generally in the same sort of circle since, I imagine, haven't we?
Yeah, hanging out
And we
at
keep
conferences. I remember just like hanging out in hotel rooms at various
yes.
conferences and, sipping on wine that somebody brought and playing video games. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, no, and yes, it's always wonderful to see your work and to work together on things. I think one of the nice things that I really enjoy about working with you is being able to kind of jump into ideas and to play about with different perspectives. And we don't spend a lot of time talking, but we kind of meet back up at various points. It's always exciting to be able to kind of bump back into you and talk about different things you've been doing and all the rest of it. So
I
yeah,
know we
good
did a
fun.
tech check yesterday, and the tech check doesn't take long for this. It's like, here, let me show you here's what the stream looks like, and let's practice sharing everything, make sure the sound goes through. But then after that, I think we spent like 2 hours yesterday
Yeah,
just
we
hanging
did.
out. So
Yeah.
I enjoyed that very much.
It
So
was
yeah, I
indeed.
think everybody in this field is just lovely. I'm very lucky to be a part of it, and I'm very excited to have you on stream. That you agreed, and we're excited to come on. And the problem with you though is that you have too many good publications. So we were spoiled for choice as to what we wanted to feature because, as I'm sure most of our chat knows, you have your wonderful introduction to video game music book that a lot of us use pedagogically, just kind of framing how to listen to music and how to approach music in video games, and it's just such a wonderful text. So I knew a lot of people were pretty familiar with that one, or at least they've read certain chapters of it for things. So I posed the question to Tim. I was like, what do you feel like people haven't read? Which is kind of what I did with Will, as well, because Will also has so many different things and a lot of places we could go. And you mentioned this chapter.
I did, yes, and you very kindly suggested another one, which was a Naxos Musicology Online, which I
Yes,
think you're the only person in the world who has read,
I love
because it
it.
exists in sort of like in the internet corner equivalent of like in the back of the spice cupboard behind some Pringles that you've forgotten in the dusty back. That's kind of where on the internet this thing is. So if anyone's interested in that, just email me because nobody can see the thing. So if you are interested in that, which is music and ritual and games and things. But yes, and somebody's noticed the Mickey on the shelf. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Yes, this is Sorcerer Mickey.
I knew
Hello,
our
hello.
chat would catch it immediately.
There we go. There's Mickey here along for the ride too.
Yeah,
So yeah.
totally. Yeah, I love the ritual one. We might cover that one at some point because, again, as you said, I don't know if people have necessarily seen it, and tracked it down, but I think it's so cool. So that's one that I'd like to cover at some point. But this one, then you mentioned this Disney one, Fantasias on a Theme by Walt Disney, Playful Listening and Video Games in the Oxford Handbook of Cinematic Listening. So I'm assuming because it is cinematic listening, was this the only game related piece? Was it mostly film?
No, there is at least one other one in it. So I was approached to do it by Carlo, who is a lecturer at Cardiff, and I sort of bumped into him a few times, and he was interested in having something about. He was interested in having something about VR.
Mm.
So I said, and Michiel Camp and I had been talking, and he said he was interested in VR. So I said, I don't have anything on VR right now, but Michiel Camp might. And so what I didn't know at the time is that actually, no, Michiel Camp hadn't had VR at the time, but that managed to persuade him into give him an excuse to buy himself a VR headset. So they are passing it forward. Yeah, I was asked, but he basically said, well, do you have anything new want to do anyway. And so I had been throwing around um, this Fantasia thing. I'd stumbled across that there were these Fantasia games, and Fantasia is a movie that has always sort of been like fascinating for me. My when
Oh no.
young, very sort of, I must have been about sort of 10 or something like that. And I was insistent, end of term, end of the school year, teacher puts on a video, and I was insistent that we should watch Fantasia because this was just brilliant. And of course, so the teacher, okay, I brought my video in. It's like, yes, okay, we'll watch Fantasia. And of course, I was the only one enraptured by this. Everyone else, complete chaos, rest of the classroom. I was the only one sitting there, absolutely entranced by Fantasia, and thought this was brilliant. So I've always had a fondness for the Fantasia films, and so thought, and really, actually, Carlo's kind of prompt for this is like, well, actually came into it. So I was thinking about what do these games represent? What do they do? How are they interesting? And his prompt to think about them in terms of listening was actually the thing I needed to kind of make it kind of come kind of together. Yeah, that's sort of where the genesis was. It took quite a long time to come out. It's relatively recent, but I think I must have been writing this in about 2018.
Oh wow.
Something which I don't know if I've told you yet, but one of the things that happened is that I was writing this around about the time Will Gibbons was finishing Unlimited Replays. And I figured out, and I don't know how I worked it out. I think it's because he did a talk at my university, and he talked about some of the Fantasia games. And I thought, oh no.
You mentioned some in the book, and you're like, uh-oh.
Yeah. So you have the I mean, lots of people get there. It's like, oh no, someone else is talking about the same thing.
Right. Where are they at in the process? What are they doing with it?
Exactly. So I said, I mean, my main fear was that I knew this was going to take a while because edited books do take ages. So I thought, well, and Will and I had known each other for a long time. So I said, look, just so that I hear that you're working on this. Look, here is my current draft. This is what I'm working on, just so that you can see it and that I'm not kind of copying you. And he very generously then sent me a copy of what he was working on, and it was all fine. And we go in different directions with it anyway. But it's a nice moment of being able to do what I think an academic community can do really well, which is to share and go from becoming the kind of paranoid sort of who's working on what sort of stuff into this kind of collective thing, which is much nicer. So yeah, that's kind of how it came about.
Yeah. And how was you said it was a long process, but was the editorial process, really pleasant? What kind of a dialogue did you have with Carlo throughout this?
Yes, it was very straightforward, actually. It just took a long time because Carlo, you will notice that most of these big Oxford handbooks, sort of doorstop-sized volumes, they are usually edited by more than one person.
Right.
Carlo did it all himself, and it's huge.
Yeah.
He said to me a few times that it's a lot to be doing it. So it just took a while from that. But it was a lovely experience. The thing that he added, and the reviewers prompted me to kind of add in it. I think there were reviewers for this. My memory is very hazy. As I say, it's quite new, but I wrote it ages ago. Was the stuff about to lean more into the gesture stuff, which I hadn't done much before, and so the coming material in the chapter that kind of came through. There weren't a lot of notes on it, but that's kind of where it kind of came through with it. So yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting to see how editors see these grains in what you're doing, and they sort of recommend, oh, bring this out, or I'd really like to hear more about this, or you're doing maybe too much on this part, and I tend to get the okay, trim your lit review.
Yes.
So yeah, it's like you feel like, oh, I got to set this up, and then just recently on my most recent thing, some friends are reading it because I don't have the benefit of two editors in my own book. And Lisa did a really good job, like really going after my animation stuff, but I just wanted some more eyes on it. And actually both of them were kind of like, your work is fine. You can like maybe trim a little bit of the lit review and like let your stuff be a little bit bigger. I was like, yeah, okay. Feels nice to be empowered to be able to do that. But yeah, I'm always very anxious about gathering as many sources as possible and, being as exhaustive as I can, which isn't always possible given whatever discourse I'm drawing on. As I'm
Yes,
making an
yes,
emotion and music seminar for the fall, the literature on emotion outside of just music is too vast. You
yes.
have to really specialize, like philosophy and emotion, historiography of emotion, psychology and emotion, neurobiology and emotion. So it's like I'm trying to find a way to kind of like in the intro weeks, I'm actually struggling with like figuring out what's a good way to give folks a sense of just how vast this. Maybe I'll just make a bibliography and like skim this.
Well, don't
Um,
fall down the rabbit hole. 'Cause I think this is always the risk. It's
yeah.
about, you can. I think with most things, you can get absolutely lost
Hmm.
forever. And it is very, very tricky. So I'm very, very sympathetic.
Yeah. And then as soon as we get into like the actual emotion weeks, it's like, bam, I have plans. So it's entertaining, the approach to literature review and all that. And we'll get to this throughout. You weave in your narratology sources really beautifully. Like it's all very organic. It doesn't feel like here's all the lit review dumped on you, and then we get to my stuff. It's just really really synthesized throughout, which I really appreciate.
But
So
I'm glad you
anyway.
like it because I think there was a different structure initially on it. I think initially it did have a different structure, which was much more of what you just described.
Hmm.
So I'm glad that you feel that it works. I
Yeah.
felt it was a bit, reading back through it just today, I felt it was a bit gruff. I don't think it sounds like it. It starts to sound like me around about halfway through. I'm reading it
Gruff,
back and
huh?
I'm thinking, is this me? Is this me? And I've always had a bit of a problem earlier on from sounding a bit sort of, well, this is what it is. You just look at the thing, and this is the thing. So I was interested to reread it and think, oh, I'm feeling a bit abrupt there. Maybe it was just my editing or something. And so I feel about halfway through, it's like, oh, there I am, eventually talking in this piece. So yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting to like look back at your work and see like, do you recognize yourself and where you're at in your tone, and
Mm.
how much we talked about this last week doing my Cleopatra chapter, that I was really tickled with how much Will and Steve let me get away with certain turns of phrase that I thought were a little over the top with like the mummy illusions, and because I finally got to write on Egypt, so I got really swept away with that. And they let me have my little mummy metaphors and talking about like and yeah, like some of my little alliterations and I'm so pleased by it, because then when I read those over again, I'm just like smiling to myself. Feels like I got away with something. So it is nice when you feel like your voice is there and it's not just getting hammered into a certain model of academic ease.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely.
So, to kind of fit this into the cinematic listening, you open up with what the Fantasia films themselves do. So, you're saying these are concerned with cinematic listening, and the idea here being that you could just listen to all of these classical works on their own. So, the fact that we chose to do these elaborate animated sequences on them is already kind of putting the spectators in a different mode of listening. Is that sort of a way to capture that?
Yes, absolutely. And they are each of the different episodes in Fantasia sort of is different ways of understanding the music, which is always very interesting. And in the opening, Dean Taylor in the openings does this sort of weird monologue where he kind of goes, "Don't worry, folks, it's not by experts, it's by artists. Come and listen." And it's this sort of slightly anti-intellectualist thing, which is a bit weird. But yeah, they are framed as these sort of ways of engaging with the music,
Mm-hmm.
and different ways. I think the contrast between the pieces is one of the interesting things about it. So,
And it's sort of surprising, some of the imagery. It's like if I sit there and try to come up with my own imagery for Rite of Spring, would I have gone to dinosaurs? I don't know.
but can you not now think of dinosaurs when you listen to it?
Right, it pops in. Actually, when I hear Rite of Spring, I think of my husband proposing, because he put on Rite of Spring to throw me off the scent. And so I was going, what are you like? Why are you playing Rite of Spring? We were on a boat too. So it was like, why are you playing Rite of Spring right now? And because I was so distracted by that, I didn't see him getting down on one knee and all that. So I was actually surprised. But also dinosaurs. But I also
Also
think of
dinosaurs.
dinosaurs. So yeah, there are personal associations too. Yes. So already the film has opened up this space. And then you also point out video game adaptations of Fantasia are kind of inevitable in the sense that Disney has always reached outside of the cinematic world. It has merchandising, it has the parks, it is omnipresent in our lives. And so it makes sense that they would want to get into video game adaptations of Fantasia specifically, but really of any Disney properties.
Yes, yeah,
I remember
absolutely.
playing the
Absolutely.
Aladdin on both the Super
Oh
Nintendo and the
yeah.
Genesis as a kid, and how hard it was for me
Yes.
because I was pretty
Well, I
little.
think they are hard games.
Yeah,
Indeed, indeed. Oh, I like Aria's comment here in the chat about the Rite of Spring with Dinosaurs T-shirt, which is
yeah.
fantastic.
I think I
That
need to
sounds
see a
great.
picture of said shirt because that sounds perfect. Yeah,
Lovely.
Rite of Spring and a Proposal Story. Well, he said, if he had picked something more romantic, then I would have immediately known what was going on. So it it was purely to. We had also seen Rite of Spring together. Like we had a really memorable date where we had
Yeah,
gone
yeah.
and seen Cleveland Orchestra play Rite of Spring, and it was a really great performance. And they paired it with, what did they do? Beethoven something or other. I'm trying to remember. Beethoven 9 maybe. It was like a very epic concert. Um,
Light stuff.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, here's what I've decided your thesis
Oh, thanks. Can you
because
do
I
this for
do
all
that.
my research now? Can I just give you like my research and you can write abstracts, write introductions? Just do that. That'd be great. Love
I
that.
make these beautiful PowerPoints, and here have this PowerPoint if you ever want to go over this again.
Okay.
So you write, there have been 3 video games directly based on Fantasia. These games provide a useful site for investigating listening in audiovisual contexts, and in video games in particular, not least because they invite comparison with film. Um, yeah, you have a little more stuff. So that's kind of your thesis, and then kind of your walkthrough statement is keeping in mind both film and game incarnations of Fantasia. This chapter draws on narratology and phenomenology to discuss how modes of listening are configured in the video games. It further suggests that what those games might tell us about musical listening more generally, which I love. I love that it expands out beyond the games themselves.
Yeah, this is. I mean, if you look at most things I write, there's a sentence that does this. It's the it's looking out, but also looking at the same time. Oh, it's like a mirror.
We could
So I
use
do
this
this quite a
elsewhere.
lot.
Yeah.
Yes, it's it's both informs and is informed by. Those are really
Mm-hmm.
useful phrases I find to write
Mm-hmm.
because they also help to justify your case studies.
Yeah.
Because and with the possible exception of the Xbox, these Fantasia games are, I imagine, are going to be on very few people's sort of "this is my favorite game ever" sort of
Mm-hmm.
lists. The other thing I'm doing here is also saying, sorry, kids, there's not Kingdom Hearts in this. As I'm sort of saying,
You do mention that.
that's
You
another.
you kind of point out, yes, Kingdom Hearts and yes, Epic Mickey. Which Andrew
Yeah.
Powell, I don't know if Andrew's in chat today, but Andrew just finished a chapter on Epic Mickey for our animation book. So
Oh,
so
how
that has now been
wonderful.
looked at. So a nice
Lovely.
companion.
I can't wait for that.
Yeah, getting into that. But I think there's nothing wrong with limiting the scope and
You think you have?
yeah, you have to at some point. Otherwise, you're talking, you end up writing a book instead of contributing to a book.
Yes.
So there's only so many games you can cover in however many words. Six
Indeed.
thousand, 8,000. So here are the 3 games that we will feature today. We have the Atari Sorcerer's Apprentice from 1983, the Fantasia for Genesis Mega Drive in 1991, and Fantasia Music Evolved for Xbox 360 and Xbox One in 2014.
Mhm.
And here's the game covers. And you actually have the boxes, you said,
Yes, I do.
right?
So I have
Show and
the
tell time.
show and tell. Yes. So here is the Atari Sorcerer's Apprentice. This slightly duffed up box here. But here it is. Here's the
Oh, love the
cartridge.
cartridge.
This is the PAL version. Mickey Mouse, the Sorcerer's Apprentice, is in deep trouble. Yeah. An army of brooms is flooding the sorcerer's cavern with endless buckets of water. Help Mickey use his magic in the mountains and in the cavern to stop the flood, and fast for one player. So you have this box, and this lovely kind of cover art on it as well. And the one of the things I think is interesting is if you look at the manual, which is also quite nicely laid out because you have all the different sort of languages at the
Yeah.
top here, which is very but halfway through, it tells you there is a section where it actually tells you how to listen to the game. It says, use the following sound guide to help you learn the different game sounds. Sounds are especially helpful when Mickey is in the mountains. I'll come to this in a minute. Because they let you know what is happening on the other screen. I'm just substituting with it, but so it literally tells you, and it tells you about the different sounds that you should be listening for when you play the game.
Oh,
so
goodness,
even
that's so cool.
in the manual, it's telling you, look, listen
to this game. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
It's going to teach you a lot about what's going on and how to play, and yeah. Oh,
Absolutely.
that's so neat. Yeah, and I have a big, in the notes I took on this chapter, I had big, like, all caps, exclamation points, excitement, because there is a footnote at this point describing the games where Tim tells us that you played the original versions, and then specifically cites which emulator.
I do, and
that you played both modes, and then very clear as to, like, no, I have the originals, and played the originals, but then also for emulation of the Atari and the Genesis, I used I don't remember which one, Swan or something.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that, because I think sometimes we talk about these things without enough specificity, knowing that it does matter in terms of the fidelity of what's being captured in emulation. We know that there are things that they still struggle to emulate properly even today from those earlier systems. So it's really good to sort of triangulate that against the original when you have the access to be able to play the original.
Yeah, and in the case of the Mega Drive in particular, there are certain runs of the Mega Drive, and I can't remember which ones, but there are certain production lines of the Mega Drive itself which have notoriously bad sound chips. And it's called something like, they call it like, the stinker, that's what they call it. There's those who chip enthusiasts talk about the stinker production. So even one console, even one physical console, one region, different production runs can have different versions. Yeah, so that's sort of one of the reasons I mentioned it. Also, because there is a problem with the PAL region version of the Atari game, whereas because it runs at a different speed, some of the tuning is wrong. And so it doesn't quite work. So most of what I'm talking about is much better evidenced in the North American version.
Okay, yeah, I've seen that problem pop up. Actually, again, to reference the thing I just did, the Dragon's Lair chapter, the NES Dragon's Lair had the same speed problems, where the opening theme is way faster in the European release. So. Which is kind of cool. It doesn't not work, but everything is sped up.
Right. Yes.
So yeah, that same problem shows up in a lot of places. So just being really, really clear about what we're looking at, instead of just acting like the game itself is even a stable entity, because that can be really hard to suss out too. A lot of this, if they're making changes to the actual cartridge in like a second production run or something, most players aren't going to be aware at all. Or as Steve Reilly has talked about, patches, patching things in and out of the game. There can be a lot where we don't even know what's missing, what's changed. And sometimes we don't have the skill to necessarily dig through and see the coding, or, we don't have the access to see it. But anyway, I was just really, really gobsmacked by that. I had exclamation points like, oh my goodness, like saying which emulator, and like, but then also having the wherewithal to play the original versions.
Yes, what I didn't note, though, was the light fitting I managed to take out when playing the Fantasia game. Well, waving my arms around on the Xbox Kinect, there was one lampshade which was a casualty, which I probably should have memorialized in a footnote somewhere.
I love that. That would be a good Easter egg. Yeah, rest in peace, lampshade. Okay, so these are the three. Obviously, there are other games that have certainly Kingdom Hearts deals in Mickey. All of the Disney properties, really. And Epic Mickey also gets into Sorcerer Mickey. But these three serve as... And there's a nice span here from 83 to 2014. So good sense across time over how these games are approaching listening, too. So there's a nice spread where it's not like three released pretty close to each other.
Yeah.
Or competing, you could look at like competing ports of the same game, like in some cases, too. That can be interesting. Like I mentioned,
Yes.
Aladdin. Comparing the Genesis to the SNES versions of Aladdin is always really interesting. But
Yeah,
here we
yeah,
get a nice spread. So Sorcerer's Apprentice for Atari 2600 from 1983 is based on the sequence in the film. And the players control Mickey, and they have to stop enchanted brooms from flooding the cavern with their accompanying buckets. And so the player, as mentioned earlier, has to navigate between two screens and kind of balance between the two. And so there's the cavern where we're trying to prevent the flooding, and then in the mountains, there is, I guess, a meteor shower because stars keep falling that cause another broom to appear in the cavern. And then you can catch them, and it prevents them from spawning. But then you can also use the stars as a projectile weapon to destroy other potential broom stars or target a comet. And then you explain what the comets do, that they... a lot of depth to this game. Comets are particularly valuable. Each comet that Mickey hits conjures 2 enchanted buckets in the cavern that reverse the action of the brooms. As the game progresses, the speed of the stars increases, making Mickey's task all the more difficult. Points are awarded for activities such as eliminating the brooms, catching stars, and summoning buckets. So this is like Tetris in that you are doomed to eventual failure.
Yes,
The cavern will eventually flood to end play.
Should we have a look at it?
Yeah. So here's the 2 screens.
Okay.
And then shall we bring up do you want to play a little for us?
Should we try it? This might go horribly wrong. Let's have a go. I mean, it will go horribly wrong. It's a terrible game and I'm awful at playing it.
That's okay. We also have footage.
Okay.
So, if you really embarrass yourself, we'll just go to the footage.
I'm very used to embarrassing myself, Taylor.
Yeah, go ahead and share to Discord and I'll pull it up on.
Okay, let's have a go at this. I am using the Stella emulator here. Stella. Here we go for this one. I can't remember what I used in the chapter. So let's have a go at sharing screen and see what happens. I'm on Stream Guests and I go share my screen. Here we go. Okay.
Excellent.
Okay. And you're hearing me as well at the same time?
Not yet, because
okay.
you're on the menu screen. But but once you go in, okay, video game.
Okay.
PowerPoint. And yes. Eh? Okay, where are you? Come on. Discord. This worked yesterday. No, maybe this one. Yes, okay. Ugh, gotta resize the window, do all the things. One sec. Okay, I'm not hearing it though.
No, it's not making any sound at the moment.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
Okay, good. All right, then.
Let's try.
Let's resize this window a little. Mickey is big. All right, there we go.
Are you hearing some sound?
No.
Ah. Is that my doing?
It's very quiet. Let's see if I can boost anything on my end. Open volume mixer. Discord, it's all the way up. Which is surprising because it was plenty loud yesterday.
Did I have to? Is there a separate sharing? Should I try and reshare? Is there a separate thing for including? Okay, sharing my screen.
There we go.
Okay. Okay, I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Yes.
give up on this and go back.
Yeah.
Let's just give up on this. I'm going to stop. Stop it. Right.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, there's audio recursion. I don't know if I mean, I'm muted on Discord, but that's certainly a form of listening, isn't it?
The thing is also, for me, it's absolutely deafening. I've got to take one of my earphones out.
Oh my goodness.
It's so loud.
This is why we have footage. we have a backup plan, everyone. No worries. Oh goodness.
I apologize for anybody who got.
Well, we got it to work yesterday, so I don't know. It's being, and I changed nothing, so I don't know. It was just being finicky with what it wanted. Oh goodness. Anyway, that was fun. Here's some. Oh, and actually, the gameplay might be on the next screen.
To stop the music from playing as being part of the thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Unintentional experimental music through tech difficulties via Twitch. Exactly.
Yes.
This was intentional. This was all part of the plan.
Oh yes, yes. It's deeply performative.
Yeah. So anyway, as mentioned in the manual, the sonic output allows the players to understand what's happening in the game beyond what you're able to see at the moment. So we will see in this gameplay footage coming up that there's a bell tone for hitting or catching a star. There's a little chromatic ascending scale starting on C4 for hitting a meteor or comet, where you create the 2 empty buckets. There's a swoosh sound when a broom is created or stopped. And then there's a musical tune for when the water level changes, and this is the bassoon gesture given here. And this is actually, this becomes faster and more frequent during play, and it's actually split into 4 fragments. And do they play sequentially? I'm trying to remember how you...
No, they're randomized.
They're randomized. Okay. So you can hear bum, 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 bum.
Yes.
And you can hear bum, 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 bum.
Yes, yes.
And then bum, 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 bum. And then bum, 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 bum. So there's my little sight singing for the day. The E along the bottom, you hear the entire thing at the beginning when you boot up a game, and then you hear these fragments, and they start playing over each other. It actually gets kind of chaotic as you go on. They interrupt each other. It's very frantic. And so once you understand what this is doing, then it teaches you what's going on. When you're out trying to catch stars, you can go, oh no, something's happening in the cavern without having to be there. And you relate this to McKillkemp's semiotic hearing, giving player info about gameplay states or events. So.
Yeah, and so you start playing the game, and you hear now when you listen to it, there are these sort of fragments, and as a player you kind of go, what does that mean? Because I can't initially work out what that connects to. And so there's music happening. This obviously means something. What does it mean? And only subsequently, either after you read the booklet or you actually work out what's going on from there. So yeah, maybe we can have a listen to it.
Yeah, let's take a listen to the footage here. The video's a little quiet. So a little quiet. That's just the other. I don't think the other ones are quite as quiet.
No, this game only plays in 2 modes: extremely quiet or deafening.
Yes.
That's it. But you can see that you start to hear. Okay, so what you want to really not hear is that tune, because that tune means you're losing, because it means the water is rising. So there's a whole kind of thing here going on about where you want to stop that music really from playing on so many levels. yeah, that's kind of what the listening is sort of. So you're learning how to engage with it, and you think, is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? When is it going to appear? Which fragment am I going to get? So you're projecting exactly. Yeah, this point about you're listening, you know the tune, you're thinking, how is it going to appear? You kind of don't want it to. Because, oh no, I'm losing. Because
Right.
when you hear the theme, that's what's happening.
And especially if it gets, more frequent and faster, that's going to kind of make you go, oh no.
Yes.
And then you're kind of rushing to try to stop it.
Yes.
So what's interesting here, and what I did not know, is that there had been a cinematic re-release of the original Fantasia right around when this game came out, so it would have been fresh for everyone. And this is where it was clear that you and Will had talked to each other, because you're citing Will here, where the Atari tune is a memory trigger for players to sort of imagine the full version in their head from the chipped down version. And this is similar to how we're extrapolating from the pixels our memory of the fully animated Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
So the
Yes,
same thing
indeed.
happens sonically. And I think this point's been brought up in other movie adaptations too, with like, E.T. or the Star Wars game, especially the Atari games that adapted those properties. And so they would, put a lot of the audio attention on the title screen where it had the theme from the movie that we all know.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
So that's always an important moment. And so this broom motif recalls the fully orchestrated version. And then you've previously referred to this as texturing. Do you want to quickly remind everyone what texturing is?
Yeah. It's a idea that by pulling on these sort of semiotic known references, it rounds out beyond what you're seeing in the game. Particularly with this idea that if you have low quality graphics or even just limited perspectives, it doesn't have to be because of low quality graphics, but it situates what you're doing. It implies a depth to what's there that you can't actually see.
Mm-hmm.
So by thinking about, by having the tune, it brings to bear all the other stuff to help round out the gameplay.
Yeah. And you discuss that a lot more in your Understanding Video Games book, I believe, is where that lives. So if anybody is interested in more on texturing, because it gets cited regularly enough, I know I've seen it in several places. It's a useful analytical tool. So that's where you can find that. And somewhere, where is my Understanding Video Games? I think it's over here.
There it is.
Gotta have my copies of everything. So yes,
beautiful
book.
That's very generous.
Beautiful book. And do I have an order? Yeah, I have my order sheet still in here. That's fun. $99 US.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right. Yes, they are. It is very expensive, particularly when it first comes out. I think there's a paperback now, but
there's a paperback now. I usually don't want to wait for paperbacks depending on what it is. I have to gauge am I willing to wait or do I need it now? Usually I need it now.
Very hard.
And I make a budget. Or sometimes, depending on what it is, I see if a library where I'm teaching maybe can buy a copy. And it's really great when there's an ebook and they can get the license for the ebook, and I can see it that way.
Yes.
But I like at some point I usually make sure I have my own copy. I like having a physical book if it's something I'm going to be referring to. I really like when I can do both. When I have some kind of searchable text, if I'm what was that thing in the book, and then I can pull it up with a Control F. But I like having the physical book just for the actual reading through the whole thing the first time. I'm very into that sort of materiality. Anyway, so more on texturing in there. And this is pointing out what we've said about the rate becomes more frantic. The individual fragments start to bump into each other, interrupt one another, and it becomes trickier to sort of treat them as separate. They kind of blur together in a way. And
Yes.
so we start over in one mode of hearing, where we're having this texturing and this sort of semiotic hearing that's happening, and then we kind of move over to this other type of hearing in the course of a round, where first of all we don't want the music to play. Because we know what it signifies now, and it kind of blurs together into like just a background layer,
Yeah.
and it sort of ceases its distinctive identity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then we get to the second example, which is
Yes.
Fantasia for the Genesis and the Mega Drive from 1991.
Yes.
There
I have
we
my
go.
copy here.
Beautiful.
And again, I just love the manuals. You know, this is
I
what
love
it's
a
all
good game
about.
manual.
And in this platformer game, and in the different worlds, different, you know, as you've got on your lovely slide there, excerpts from the orchestral pieces are played. And in the booklet, it tells you for each of the worlds what the piece of music is.
Oh, great.
So, you know, it tells you about the different, and so you can look up and tells you which levels have which pieces. So level 2 is the Rite of Spring, level 3 is the Pastoral Symphony, and so on. So even the little manual tells you about this as well. Oh, there we go. Yeah, excellent. You've got them there. Way ahead of me. Excellent. So yeah, so again, manuals, wonderful resources.
Oh, love it. I wish the Star Tropics manual hadn't made me put water on it back in the day.
Oh,
Did you ever play Star
right.
Tropics growing up?
No, I don't know if we had that over here or not.
Yeah, it was a very American. I mean, the main character's name is Mike, and he's an ace pitcher, and he fights with a yo-yo. So very much geared to like American boys. But you know, he's hopping around the different islands to try to rescue his father, who's been abducted by aliens. And there was a moment where you had to dip it in water to get it to reveal a code. Like the ink would only appear once you dipped the manual in water. And they, if you don't know that, it's not super clear. The submarine is like, oh, you have to enter a code to like keep going.
Gotcha.
And in the days before, you know, the internet was super accessible for this sort of thing, you had to have the manual, and if you didn't, you were really out of luck. You'd be calling the Nintendo hotline on your parents' dime to figure out what is the code for the submarine. But yeah, I don't remember if that one was they were all like American related. One of them was like 1776, and
Oh, I see. Yes.
so I don't remember if that's the specific one. But yeah, you had to dip them in, so then it's all warped and oh, anyway, so that poor manual got ruined.
Got sucked. Oh no.
But yeah, we try to here we are big fans of when we find stuff in box. We're not super careful about having like mint condition or anything. Those kinds of collectors are a different breed, but
I think so.
I know Joe and I are really big on having like the actual boxes and the manuals, and he likes the original strategy guides too when he can find those.
Yes.
Some of those are just absolutely lovely, and they're better than just printing out stuff from like game facts, you know.
Yes.
It's just so much better to flip through, and some of them there's a Zelda one, I'm trying to remember which Zelda game it was, where it's like done in this very like narrative style.
Oh, how interesting.
You know, saying and then Link did this, and
I see,
so some of them are like really fun in how they're written. And actually, for my birthday this past year, Joe found me the original Japanese guide for Harvest Moon, Bokujo no Monogatari, for the Super Nintendo version, because that was the first thing I ever bought with my own money, as I was telling you yesterday, the original Harvest Moon for Super Nintendo. So Joe found the original Japanese guide, and it's so cute.
Lovely.
So that was lovely. We're a big fan of the manuals and stuff. And also for folks that don't know, Internet Archive has a really good they're making progress on documenting as many of them as possible. So a lot of different game manuals you can find scans of, even if you don't have the physical copy. So what a wonderful resource that is.
Yes, actually, some work I've been doing recently about King's Quest 4.
Oh yeah.
I found Internet Archive being exceptionally good for looking at contemporary reviews. They're very searchable. also contemporary adverts as well. So finding out how these games were promoted and what they were alongside, how they were previewed. It's extremely good resource, particularly now as the optical character recognition is so much better than it was.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend that. It's been very, very sort of some work I'm doing at the moment. So yeah.
Wonderful resource. So here's a little. Yeah, it's complete or nearly complete for NES, and then they're starting to work on some of the other systems as well. Yeah, it's such a wonderful resource. So let's support that. And then here is some footage of the Sega Mega Drive Genesis version, and this is the Sorcerer's Apprentice level, as it were. This version slaps. It just makes you nod your head, right? What a wonderful bass line. So good. And this game's quite hard, right? You were saying
it's extremely
I haven't played
hard.
this one.
It's really, really, really hard. Yeah, and that's really quite crucial, actually. This is extremely hard. Because the biggest thing is that you have to jump over. But if you want to land on a mushroom or whatever it is, you would think standard platformer, run, jump, splat, you win, off you go, sort of thing. But with this one, you actually have to press down as well as when you land on it. And that sounds very simple, but actually playing is an absolute nightmare. And it's really, really, really hard. And so you want to do, but the key thing you just said, it makes you want to nod your head. And that is the kind of exactly the thing. You kind of want to make Mickey go down, and you want to make him bounce across the screen in time with the tune. But that makes it even more difficult. And it makes it even harder. Yeah, exactly. The desire to Mickey Mouse your Mickey to the music. Yeah, you want to do that, but that makes it really hard. I had a quick go at playing it earlier. I'm not going to try sharing again, but I tried. I tried playing it earlier, and I failed to get through the first level again. I have played this on original hardware, and it took me a very, very, very long time, I think, to get to the second level on it.
Having to press down kind of reminds me of like a ground pound in later games where you have to, like, once you jump, you press something else, and then that gives you the downward momentum. But first of all, it's mapped differently, and it's just like this is an era before, so it's like just not as intuitive when the button scheme changes. There kind of ends up being this like hegemony of control schemes where if a game is really far outside that, it can be really difficult for players to kind of get the learning curve.
Yes.
A new player, if they've never played a game before and that's their first game, that's all fine. But a lot of us are going to bring the previous gaming experience to how we control whatever one we're in.
Mickey's very slow. It takes a lot of. Sorry, I shouldn't have been insulting. But the very slow movements, a lot of momentum to start going and stopping, which makes it even more difficult. So yeah, absolutely.
And just in case folks are wondering why Mickey Mouse is in quotes, this is from animation and film theory and the kind of early short cartoons, not even the features yet, where the music is mimicking exactly the motion on the screen in a way that in live film would seem a little bit like heavy-handed or over the top. There's something about animated film where having that exact correspondence really help. They like mutually animate one another, and so Mickey Mousing is really effective in animated films and is often seen as a challenge in live action films because the music is supposedly doing other things. It's adding, narrative and adding all of these other layers where it can be really hard to be literal about the action at the same time. So it ends up conflicting a bit. So sometimes you're going to see Mickey Mousing used in a pejorative context to suggest that the music is kind of not not doing enough on its own, or like, kind of that absolute music ideal of like, it's completely reliant on the image for any meaning. And of course, the animation scholars have debunked that and proved like the power in Mickey Mousing. But anyway, here we get to use the literal pun, which is very fun. Mickey Mousing your Mickey to the music instead of the music Mickey Mousing to Mickey.
That's a tongue twister. Well done. That was
that was being cute. Being cute. So, you point out in a film context, it's very easy to identify this correspondence because the music's being scored to pre-rendered material. But in a game situation like Fantasia, the player is empowered to influence the game's diegetic action to conform to or obviously defy such material organization. And so this one is particularly applicable to all gaming. This notion of like, how am I moving my character relative to the background level track? And so the game ends up exerting a bit of, especially here, like it's just so sharp timbrally, and like it's so distinctive. And it exerts influence on the player to move the avatar to the music, or they have to make a decision not to, right? Yes. And of course, a player can adopt different playing styles to the music, and in different levels. They might play very differently because the track changes. And you can also refuse to play along with this and say, this is actually messing me up to try to move with it. And so you may have to kind of resist it actively, which can add more challenge. But this is the point where you're like, well, this might undermine what I'm saying about the music being powerful, right? This indeterminacy might indicate that music's not as influential as has been claimed, but instead, the indeterminacy is part of the attraction. And all games are conditioning players to sort of read and respond to game music through play. We saw that in the Atari example, too, that they're conditioning the player to know what that music means and to use it or try to prevent it or try to do something with it. And here's just a similar idea in terms of how do I play the game as a result of what I'm hearing.
Yes, absolutely. And if the Atari one is about trying to stop the music, this one's about kind of keeping it going.
Speaking of keeping the music going, we also get Fantasia Music Evolved.
We do. This one is fun.
It's really interesting. So this game is for the Xbox and Kinect. So there's gestural input here, which is great. And there are kind of two elements from the original film that inform this. One is the abstract shapes and patterns of the opening toccata and fugue in D minor segment. And then, of course, the moment in the Sorcerer's Apprentice sequence when Mickey dreams of conducting the stars and waves, which respond to his gestures in synchrony with the music. So there's sort of conducting angle here. The gameplay is about tracing abstract shapes with gestures in the air, which is akin to conducting. And you have some footage here from a review, it sounded like, because there's talking over the game footage, kind of explaining some of these elements and comparing it to conducting. We'll watch that in a minute. But Fantasia recognizes the gestural embodied aspect of listening and facilitates it in real, albeit virtual, musically interactive way. So the game is interesting in that it's not all classical music. It's also Queen, Lady Gaga, Nicki Minaj, so a lot of pop music spanning different decades. And then you're doing this gestural interaction with all of them. Here's a little bit explaining that. That's some nice gameplay footage too.
Fantasia resembles other rhythm games in the sense that it displays prompts on the screen in time to music, and you perform the appropriate actions within the necessary time frame.
I love this room that's
in games
clearly
like Rock Band, success
no
involves
one's living
pressing
room looks
buttons
like
on
that.
plastic instruments. In Fantasia, triumph comes from sweeping your arms up and down and pushing them forward and back. Needless to say, the game requires you to own a Kinect. At last, a game has come that gives you permission to sway about in your living room, waving your hands about as if you're a wannabe Leonard Bernstein, while Vivaldi's Four Seasons blasts from the speakers.
Oh, the timpani in that. The timpani in that version is great.
It's so good, isn't it?
So there you go. Wannabe Leonard Bernstein.
Yes.
Specifically, we go to Leonard Bernstein in 2014.
Yeah, exactly. And especially for the Four Seasons, that's it's
It's funny. It's like I don't know. Do people not know? Gustavo Dudamel? Maybe not. Maybe not outside of classical circles. I'm trying to think, like, who's our big cosmopolitan conductor these days? Marin Alsop a little bit. I see her. I see her pop up in pockets of the internet.
Yes.
I'm trying to think has anyone taken up the mantle of Leonard Bernstein? I don't know.
It's a good question. Simon Rattle. Oh, there is somebody in the UK. Charles Hazelwood is he sort of does kind of one of his big projects was the you might know about this. It's the orchestra for people with physical movement disabilities as well. The Power Orchestra, I think they're called. And so they do. He's been quite sort of active and does sort of these kind of documentaries where people spend a lot of time talking like this about the thing they're talking about, and then
they're talking about. Yeah,
staring off and those kind of documentaries. And so he does lots of those sort of things. That sounds like being mean. No, he's a good thing. So yeah, maybe he'd be the next sort of person. Yeah, Bernstein, obviously the point of reference. Famous bit where Bernstein did the YMCA, of course.
Yes.
For the 4 seasons.
So what's cool and very different about this game, most rhythm games, the Guitar Heroes, the Rock Bands, and SingStar, the karaoke games, when you get an input wrong, the music usually stops to reflect that you aren't performing it properly. But here you can't fail a level, and the music continues even during the incorrect actions. It gets a little quieter, but it doesn't stop. It doesn't really punish you. So the idea is, like, even if you are terrible and not picking up on the gestures, you're still going to get a complete musical experience from start to finish without that kind of interruption, which is unusual for a rhythm game.
Yes. I think I like to think this is some kind of statement about there are no wrong answers, that this pluralism, which we might come back to later if we get the stuff about queer theory, which I'm seeing this kind of going towards. But if I'm completely honest, it's also probably because the Connect is so rubbish in some ways. That people would go absolutely mad if it started to, if it wasn't as accurate. So, but it is. Rubbish. It's also good fun when it works, and it can be. I mean, it is. I'll be honest. This, out of the 3 games, this is definitely the most fun one to play. I would, if we're going to play any of these, this is the one to go for. Just watch a lampshade.
And you note that it opens up a space for personal expression over ludic success. So there's kind of a style you can bring to it, and you could just do your own gestures and just kind of enjoy having the music on and moving however you feel, and still enjoy the experience even if it's not what you need to get the highest score on that level.
Yes, absolutely. So when you can choose to integrate different instruments into the mix. So you can say, okay, so I've got 4 seasons. Let's add a synth part, and you can at certain points there are decision points that you can use to remix the track as well. So, and there, as you're saying here, there are improvisatory bonus rounds where you're able to kind of introduce particular elements. I mean, it's not like you could say, oh, I would like to add a tone row, please, into Hold My Thing. It's not going to let you do that, but it does give you options for determining aspects of musical output, which are then integrated. So they are confined, but it does give you some agency, and it allows you to maybe imagine the music can do other things, which is where the discussion ultimately goes with this.
And here's a really good example of that.
Fantasia's not just an elaborate game of Simon Says. You actually contribute to the soundscape as you play. Each song comes with 3 mixes in total, and while playing, you often have the opportunity to incorporate various aspects of those mixes together. You can stick to the original if you prefer, but doing so means you miss the pure joy of hearing a big band version of Dvorak's New World Symphony. I didn't love every mix, but for every mix that doesn't gel, there are 2 more that have me looking at the music in a new light and finding new ways to perform gestures. Mid-performance minigames also grant you control over the music by allowing you to create little melodies or rhythms by moving your hand up and down a vertical keyboard, or by manipulating a ring that adds synthesized effects to a vocal line.
Ah, so cool. And so we can also rearrange the instrumentation in this, adding rock guitar to Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, but also flamenco rhythm and a trumpet section. And so this allows for some free play because you're not getting awarded points for how good your mashup is. And so the whole point here is that this game is opening up all of these alternative musical soundings. There's not just one fixed version of the track. It's just inherently playful and allows you to experiment and explore different musical performative ludic possibilities.
Absolutely. Yes.
So here is a mix for Night on Bald Mountain. I thought was particularly fun. So you're like, okay, so far, pretty normal. Beat in there. Oh. The little like dubstep moment here. This is so good. So there we go. I think this was made for a dubstep remix. So bringing in those elements, yeah.
Something that's in music evolved. Yeah, absolutely. Whether you like it or not. But it reminded me of, as you were just playing it there, was all these. Okay, I have a real weak spot for like the classical pop mashup stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So things like Meatloaf with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, the Metallica San Francisco Symphony Orchestra stuff, all that sort of stuff. It really, I have a real weak spot for loving all the Rick Wakeman sort of Journey to the Center of the Universe, all that sort of stuff. And I think it's because it's so much fun, but also sort of quite transgressive in its own little way about those sort of mixing of registers and genres. I hadn't really thought of that until just watching that clip with you there, that it sort of ties into maybe some of that sort of aspect of it as well.
I'm going to play you my favorite mashup, possibly of all time. And everyone else can suffer along with me. I'm going to bring this up on YouTube. It's not classical, but it is a mashup of the Robo theme from Chrono Trigger with Never Gonna Give You Up by Rick Astley. And I'm not even going to resize that because there's no real visual, but here's a little bit of that. The Robo theme playing with it. Okay, no more of that. I'll probably have that audio muted on the pod.
Oh no, that's a shame. Yes.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite of all time.
That's very good. That's very good.
Thus far in life, it's almost as if they wrote it to be a backing track for Rick Astley. It works so perfectly. I've not heard that before, but I will be looking at that later. I love that one. Yeah, I'll have to send that one. There's a couple really, really good video game. There's is it Drop It Like It's Hot mixed with like Kirby track? There's some really good ones. Julianne has introduced me to some really good ones. I've always had a love of mashups.
Oh, yes,
In my
yes.
history of pop and rock course, I usually would do a week on mashups, and so students would find new ones that were always a delight. But it'd be like Bootylicious mixed with Smells Like Teen Spirit,
Right,
like
yes, yes.
stuff like that. I love a good mashup. So
I think the one I've written, I've done a kind of lecture on at one point, which is Kanye West Gold Digger with the Fifth of Beethoven Walter Murphy disco version, which is really it's extremely good. By A
amazing.
plus D. I'll have to send that over.
Another one that I
Yeah.
really like, and I think sometimes depending on like a rap can be very easily layered, but finding a really good mix of that is surprisingly hard.
Yes, I
And one of
really
my
agree.
favorites is "Stayin' Alive" by the Bee Gees with "Into Club" over
Oh
top.
yes, yes, I think I've heard that one. That's very good. That's
Yeah.
very, very good. Yes,
Oh,
yes.
I love mashups so much. Anyway, you can create some good ones here. Play in your living room, or wherever you keep your Connect. I don't even know if we have a Connect in our vast library of things. I'll have to ask Joe. Do we even have a Connect? I don't know that we do.
You just spend your time waving at the wall, going, "Come on, come on, come on, recognize me, come on."
Please,
Yes.
please register. Yeah.
I'm human, honest. Yeah.
Yeah. $1 at a yard sale. That's a
Yes.
score? Question mark. Anyway,
I think mine was secondhand as well. And yeah, and that really interesting comment there from Dr. about fireworks show. Yeah, I think there's a whole thing about fireworks and shows and the light shows and the music as well. I think is really interesting. There's something there. I think. I also think sometimes about maybe doing a follow up to this article about music in the video games about Disneyland versus the actual Disneyland places as well. But that might be something for a future time.
which just like awakened a question in me, and maybe chat knows, because this is just something I've never looked for. Has anybody worked on like remixes of classical or other music used for like figure skating or gymnastics routines in the
Ooh.
Olympics?
That's
Because
interesting.
every time I'm watching, I'm always like very interested in the music that they've picked, and they get some really unusual remixes of things. I wonder if anybody is published on that, because I would read the heck out of it. If anybody knows of anybody working on musical remixes in the Olympics, let me know. That's very ludic in and of itself.
It is indeed.
The
It is
Olympic
indeed.
Games. Let's get that stuff in JSMEG if it doesn't
Oh, we
exist.
do. Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Music, sports, things like that. Yeah, we really want to start publishing more in that field.
Right. Because again, Ludomusicology is not just video games. Just a lot of us
Yes.
really like video games. But
Yes.
Roger Mosley did not define it as video games, darn it.
No, no, indeed.
Roger Mosley talked about play, and that opens up spaces for all kinds of things.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree
Football
more.
chants and playground games,
Yes.
jump rope, all that.
Yes.
And we have had a little bit on music for D&D, people
Yep.
using playlists. Andrew Barecki, right?
Yes, that's right.
I got to be a peer reviewer on that, so if Andrew ever sees this, surprise, I was one of your peer reviewers. I really enjoyed that process. That was a fun one. I was very excited to see that one go to print.
Yeah, it was good. It was a good
Anyway,
piece. Very good.
so this game in particular, maybe more so than other games, allows us to sort of become aware of how the music might sound differently, but we actually get to hear and experience other musical possibilities. So instead of
Yes.
kind of stopping and starting, or in a platformer, like doing different things to make certain tracks sound or not sound, here we are really, really shaping the output in a way that is super obvious and encourages that kind of play. So
Yes.
all games do this, so you give a lot of examples of imagining other musical possibilities, as this is kind of
Yes.
your definition of playful listening. So
Yes.
expecting a loop to stop or continue, and then it doesn't. Wondering where the victory cue is. You're in a long JRPG battle. You're like, oh,
Yes.
I feel like I've been in his third. For how many hits does this is me playing Ocarina of Time? Actually, there were a few of those where I'm like, how many hits does he take? And then Ryan would be like 11, and I'd be like, no,
Of course, right. Yes.
because I'm terrible at the game, as we've discovered in my attempt to play through. I need to finish it. I'm in the Fire Temple. I need to finish. Sit down and like buckle down and finish the game on original hardware.
Oh yes,
You know,
historical performance.
exactly. Exactly. Other things like noticing tempo has increased, suggesting you're running out of time. What Julian Gresso has so eloquently called the "oh shit" moment in gaming.
Yes.
And a lot of us cite her just because it's exactly what it is. You're in Mario and the tempo doubles. What? I better get to the end quick. So you can also notice that a cue has been interrupted and sort of trying to figure out like what happened in the gameplay to make that change. Yeah. You might notice that the cue doesn't synchronize with the avatar's movement, and then you can make a choice there, as we saw in the Mega Drive version, that you know, you may want to make Mickey kind of dance and bop to the track, or you might want to ignore that. So all of these things fall under playful listening, and they're kind of indicative of all games, not just music-centric games.
The real sort of crux of this is this idea that the music could be doing something else. Mm-hmm. It could be otherwise, which is the kind of real, that's the sort of the nub of this idea. To think that actually I can imagine alternatives. I can imagine it's not just a question of something else could happen next, but I can imagine other ways of doing listening, engaging, music being and happening in front of right now. I could be doing something else.
Yeah. And that games offer an opportunity to interact and possibly change or, redirect. You get to actually enact those potentials instead of just imagining them. You can do that kind of imagination. I think of this. I've done this, especially when I was younger, with like favorite movies or books or something, where I would kind of imagine scenes that weren't in the book.
Yes.
And that was, very, very fruitful, imaginative play. But you can do the same thing with music. But often you go back to the same recording and it's fixed. You might listen to different recordings of the same work and hear different potentials in terms of the interpretation or covers or different versions. But this kind of opens up the space even further.
Yes.
And so you relate this. This is where we get a lot of the integrated kind of literature review instead of front loading it. It's sort of in the middle here to kind of unpack. Okay, we looked at these case studies. Now let's expand out a little bit. So we explore musical potentials, and I'm glossing over a lot of this. This is a good section, but Carolyn Abate's work, Joshua Mailman's work, Robert Hatton, Nicholas Rayland, lots of good citations through here, connecting to narrativity. And just the potential and the interactivity. I don't know if there's anything you want to add that I missed from that section. I know I'm kind of glossing it, but
yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, a lot of these people argue about whether music is telling a story or whether a music is a story activity happening in front of you.
Right.
Is it retrospectively narrating or is it a depiction of things happening in front of us?
Right.
And so I sort of skirt a little bit around that. But my point here is that, which is kind of where we started, which is that video games are showing something that is not just limited to video games, but it prompts you to think about this music in this way and to consider those potential alternatives.
Particularly good case study for us, yeah. And then you also point out watching like a long play or maybe a let's play where there's even added commentary and dialogue. We can also extrapolate some conception of what would happen if the observed player's actions were different to those captured in the video. So you can imagine the being otherwise. And I do this all the time where I'm watching, maybe Game Grumps play something, and they don't always do. Their whole point is they're not expert gamers. They just kind of play naturally, and they don't always do a lot of research. So they'll be, playing poorly. And if it's a game that I know really well, I'm like,
yes.
Go in the room, like.
yes, exactly.
And I'm trying to get them to sort of imagine otherwise,
Yeah.
And sometimes that's only solved by going and playing it yourself. If you get, if you don't like how somebody's playing something or whatever. Or we had a good example of this on stream. When we finally decided to do Link to the Past, Ryan basically started speedrunning it. And so that involves a little bit of sequence breaking. And the whole idea was he wanted to get through the whole game or most of the game in a single week, which is 2 hours. And all of us that know that game super well were suddenly like completely leveled by his play
Right,
style because
yeah.
everything was coming in a different order than we were used to. And then he wasn't spending long enough in some of the area. We had to be like, Ryan,
Yes, no doubt. Yes.
maybe we take another week on this, but have a chance to actually slow down and talk about the music like we're supposed to
Yeah.
be doing on a music stream. But
Yes.
we
Oh,
to this day we make fun of he's such an expert gamer, and he interacts with, he's not like a speedrunner himself, but he's interacted with those communities a little bit, and so he was showing off some of his gaming, and we were just like, that's cool, but we want to stop and listen.
yeah. Yes. Yes.
And
yes,
to this day we have to tell him, like, maybe pause or like hang out here for a second and like let's listen to what's going on.
Yeah.
Because usually you want to just keep playing, but if the whole point is to stop and listen to the music, then sometimes we got to do that. So we can play
Completely.
very differently from who we're seeing on YouTube. And
Yes. Yes.
a lot of times on YouTube, there are certain tracks that won't ever get triggered. If somebody's speedrunning, they're missing parts of the game. If they are an expert player, they're never dying. So if I look up a long play and I'm interested in a death cue or something, I may not get it. And
Exactly.
it can be hard to find gameplay that has all of that kind of natural failure in it.
Yes.
Even long plays tend to
the
be
point that
experts.
no one piece of music can encapsulate those. It creates those potentials that are always going to be, to a certain extent, unrealized. Unrealized. My point here is not so much, I'm listening to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, and what if there was an awesome metal guitar solo in the blue? Well, yeah, it could be that. But I'm also thinking of just more how listening to music and playing games sets up discourses and frames for you to play within and to push against as well. So it's that as games sort of happen in front of you, as they play out, those potentials are happening, and you are encouraged to think about them in a way that you are not, particularly if you have a view of music that thinks of music as a very fixed entity. And we're often not comfortable thinking about music, even one piece of music, as being this thing that is continually in flux and possibilities. So that's again why games, I think, are interesting to talk about in terms of music.
And that's one of the great contradictions in our field, because on the one hand, we sort of reify this idea of fixity of the score or whatever, and yet we go to a conservatory and are trained in interpretation. So... And then there's this tension between, and I know particularly the Cleveland Institute of Music Conservatory model, they are very much an orchestral training school. They are not like a Curtis where they're trying to make you a soloist, right? And so there's a difference there, where if you're doing orchestral excerpts, you are being trained to do it exactly like everyone else, so that you blend into that violin section and land that audition. But if you're doing your concerto, suddenly, okay, you need to have the technique to be able to then bring things out in the music, and then we do kind of inherently get into a lot of interpretation and a lot of space. But I think it's really interesting thinking about like the discourse tending to be more fixed, or that even in those spaces, like there's you can only do certain things. Like, let's not get too wild with our interpretation.
Yes,
there's maybe a range of acceptable tempos here, or ways that you want to do your voicing, weighting of the bow in a double stop or something on one string versus the other. There's some acceptable range, and then you'll have recordings where something is radically different and totally reshapes how you hear it.
Yes.
And most of my examples are Beethoven, just because Beethoven has been so done. So you can kind of go, okay, how do you hear anything new in that? But you go to a performance where suddenly it is just such a different tempo than you're used to hearing something. And I'm thinking of like Bernstein doing the second movement of Symphony 7.
Right.
And it was so slow, so much slower than most other recordings. And how you hear it completely differently, because there has been a deliberate choice made for imagining the music otherwise and bringing that to fruition. So this is something that's like kind of this like latent discourse in our field, where we tend to act like things are more fixed than they actually are.
Indeed, both in terms of the textual possibilities and in terms of the imaginative possibilities of people listening and engaging with it. Absolutely.
And then what happens when somebody does decide to sort of transgress and make the music otherwise? You know, the responses to that can be very positive. They can be gatekeeping and negative, you know, suggesting that somebody maybe doesn't know what they're doing or kind of doesn't belong in this space if they want to make, you know, the disco version of Beethoven 5. You know, okay, that's a fun novelty track, but that doesn't belong in the classical canon or whatever. Yeah, and everybody has a different relationship, I think, to how comfortable they are with this idea of interpretation and play. You know, even at a very high level with music, you can get very anxiously trained to sort of not want to deviate from the score in any way. Versus having a teacher that's like, oh yeah, learn how to improvise a concerto in Mozart, because that's what we used to do. But some people are insistent, no, you're going to play the Kreutzer cadenza, you know?
Yes.
So anyway, it's everywhere.
But that's exactly why you come back to these. This is why it is bound up with questions of power, of control, of normativity, and that's something that isn't really in the article at the moment. But it is about limits, transgressions, possibilities, and that's why you do come back to things like the wild remixes of Music Evolved. Yes, this is the kind of playful listening.
Encapsulates the playful listening. So we'll just read this as is. In characterizing a mode of listening as playful, I seek to emphasize the notion of a set of rules, processes, conditions, and the awareness that we hear one particular outcome within that projected space of possibility. An understanding of the play of possibility, whether in games or in other contexts, leads to a kind of playful listening as we cognitively interact with the music, playing with music as it plays out in front of our ears. Video games such as the Fantasia games make obvious how we engage with the implied potential world of narrative possibility generated by music. So it's a nice encapsulation of this whole playful listening and how games are a particularly good example. But certainly this is not a phenomenon confined to games. And you make that really clear in this article. It has this really broad applicability. Games are just a very good way of highlighting this element of listening.
Yes, that's a rather dense couple of sentences there. You can tell I probably edited those. They're not the most reader-friendly sentences, but hopefully gets the point across at some point.
Well, I pulled them out, so obviously I liked them.
Oh, great. That's very kind.
If it's too dense, I either hide from it or I ask people to explain things to me. Actually, Bill O'Hara doing his Proteus article, I was like reading it going, I don't know if I'm smart enough for all this like 20th century stuff that I haven't really encountered in a lot of years. And at one point I'm like, okay, I've heard of Riemann and I know what neo-Riemannian theory is, but I was like, I'm going to ask the like really basic question, which is there like a non-neo? Is there just Riemannian theory that we then formed a neo on top of? Like, well, that's the level I'm at. Like, I've heard the name. I know it exists. I know it involves transformation, but I've never actually had to do it. I had poor theory.
I'm not so much a fan of the neo-Riemannian. I'm much more a fan of the Trinity Riemannian, the Morpheus Riemannian, and the Agent Smith Riemannian theory is much better in my opinion. But there you go.
But yeah, I figure, I'll just play, not play dumb, but it's like if I don't know something, I'm certainly not going to act as though I understand. That's the beauty of having you all on. I can just ask. Like, hey,
I think this is also really important for everyone, right? Because I think everyone does that thing when they're presenting and writing. It's like, am I saying something that is completely obvious to everyone else? Or you get so wrapped up with things, actually being able to just say, hi, could you, being really obvious. I was talking with my PhD students about this, which is that people like being reassured that they know, unless it's really kind of, to an extreme degree. Mm-hmm. In general, people don't mind, if you're writing something or giving a talk, people don't mind being reminded of something that they kind of know, because they think, all right, yes, I'm on the right track with this. Yes, I understand what you mean.
Right.
And particularly with big theories and big ideas, they're particularly dangerous because on the one hand, they're assumed to be something that everybody knows. But if it's something that's so big that everyone is supposed to know it, chances are there are a million different micro-interpretations of what that actually is out there. And you might say, oh, you're Marxist this or whatever it might be. Yeah, well, yeah, but everyone's got a different idea of what that is, or even Euromanian, right? Okay, what specifically are you having in mind when you're talking about that? Or so I think going over this stuff, I'm becoming more of a fan of, okay, let's just take it from first principles. And if we're going to be serious about being interdisciplinary, if we want to talk to different audiences, to different communities, then we've got to do it. And if someone gets a little bit bored along the way, well, they can hang around and still enjoy the party. So.
And it's so important to define your terms. And again, as I'm making this emotion seminar, I'm like,
yeah,
we don't have a consensus because every single field sort of has different interpretations, and the field has changed so much. So like, yes, there's a philosophical, there's a cognitive model there, and like depending on where the research is happening, there's even defining like what is emotion. The definition of emotion varies vastly by field. And sort of, not only what is it, but like what mechanisms are behind it. And then defining, okay, so what are the basic are there any that are universal? Quickly you find yourself in this quagmire. So it's like, okay, if we're going to talk about emotion in music, that has its own history and its own way of engaging with the term, because it's kind of taken for granted that music is expressive of emotion. Kind of like a lot of this narratology stuff. We sort of take it for granted, but then once we start unpacking, well, how does it signify? Can it signify? Like, does it need a program in order for us to universally know, oh, this is depicting anger? Does it need lyrics? What can the music do without any of those things, if anything? And there's been anxiety about that for centuries in the writing. So just defining like, okay, when I use emotion here's the model I'm using. So that's kind of the example that's come up recently. But yeah, I love making sure that like I know how somebody is using a phrase, even something simple. A key term that's going to inform the analysis. I want to get a sense of where, what's your interpretation of medievalism or, narratology or semiotics or any of these things. So to summarize all our modes of listening here, you have this beautiful moment at the end where you bring it back around and you're like, okay, again, here's the 3 games and here's how playful listening happens in all of them. So the Atari 2600, it involves using the fragments and then to figure out what's happening in the game. And then, as you say, it might be about actually inhibiting the phrases from playing. So stopping the music from happening in order to indicate that you are being successful. In the Mega Drive Fantasia, we are doing playful listening by figuring out how music and game relate to each other, how they complement or are mismatched, and then again, the idea of Mickey Mousing your Mickey Mouse to align with the music or not, or saying, actually, no, I got to stop bopping and actually pay more attention to the enemies coming at me and navigate the level better. I've been swept up in that before, where my play is actually worse because of what's happening in the music. And sometimes that's an intentional choice, where the music is not really complementing the rhythm of gameplay in order to make things more difficult. So, and then the Xbox game makes all of the hypothetical other sounds a reality in the gameplay. So it's kind of the most explicit, but they're all involving playful listening. They're all sides of the same concept here.
Yes,
so
indeed.
Games encourage this playful listening. Of course, this is not unique to them, but the interactive nature of the medium prompts us to engage with alternative forms and possibilities of the music. Players are able to explore how these emergent properties and domains of musical play can contribute to, oppose, or enmesh. I love the word enmesh. Enmesh with the gameplay in which they are bound. I think it's the SH sound. It's just like enmesh.
Enmesh.
It's very like onomatopoetic.
It's tangled, it's a bit mushy, isn't it?
Yeah. This relates to musical expectation, of course, but in the sense of not just I'm anticipating what happens and it either conforms to or subverts that expectation. Instead, here we are imagining all the possibilities, and we have the ability to then experience those other possibilities. So it's not just one linear progression through the music. It's recognizing that we can actually shape the way the music comes out.
Yes, and you're doing that in tandem with the game systems. There is this push-pull kind of thing going on as well. That's happening. and that's and so you're in that dialogue of this constantly evolving thing, and that's what I think is quite interesting about the games, really.
Yeah. And then your final sentence is so good. I quoted it. Perhaps then, like us, Mickey's magic lies not in his sorcerer's hat, but in his ears.
I was so pleased with myself, and I thought, like, Craig, I can finally find them in around his
Oh, it's so good, because anyone who's been to a Disney park, yeah, right, the chat is instantly like, yep. We all know the branding of the ears. My goodness, you can get bejeweled ones on Etsy. If you do a search for like custom Disney ears, hats, you can get some pretty amazing ones.
Love a good set of Mickey ears.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So I would like to ask, because so you've alluded to this. I say, work comes out and like music, it might seem like it's fixed, right? But it's often just a piece of what we're doing, and all our work kind of, there's this accretion, and we continue and we go in different directions, and it opens up new avenues. And this has certainly done that. So you've alluded to queer theory and gaming. I'd love for you to get into that a little bit for us.
Yes. This is sort of where this idea kind of comes through a bit more. I think there were a few different things that prompted this. One is this idea of kind of playful listening, and we can talk about sort of queer theory as being approaches to oppose sort of normativity. It deals with ideas about how power structures have shaped, and they queer theory is concerned with power structures and with their challenging things otherwise. Ties in with a lot of ideas of kind of queer theory. Ties into ideas of utopia, of possibilities of alternative ways of engaging with and imagining our realities. If queerness is about challenging dominance, normativity, challenging dominance, challenging power, if it's about ideas of looking to live otherwise, to be otherwise, that ties in with this idea of imagining alternatives, breaking out of what we assume to be the sort of normative. Ideas of reimagining, resisting, remaking, those sorts of ideas that we think about. And the spaces of possibility, where there is not just one option, but there is a plurality. The idea of queer theory is of rejecting the idea of this or that, but being kind of both and, as being a philosophical approach. So that's kind of where this sort of went. Ideas of sort of time, desire, possibilities, fluidity in all sorts of ways. Something I'm really interested in. So that was kind of part of it. And the other thing that happened is that I gave a talk about some of this material, and it was at a university, and I was talking to students and faculty. And the first question, I was using some of the examples you've seen here, and I also was doing some stuff from Ocarina of Time as well. And the first question I had was from a faculty member who said
very quickly.
Oh, sorry, yeah, the
Ocarina of Time. Tim has a whole book on it.
There's a lot of Ocarina of Time to talk about. And the first question I had was, why does it sound so bad? And talking about the music, and this kind of floored me a little bit. Like, well, I didn't think it sounded bad,
right?
And they talked, and they said, and the person wasn't being nasty, wasn't trying to be dismissive. The point they were trying to make actually was, well, the violins don't sound like violins, and particularly the point they wanted to make was, well, at in 1998, Ocarina of Time, she said, well, this is so bad compared to what other music synthesis was capable of doing at the time. And the thing is that it floored me a bit, because I'd never heard the music in terms of badness. I'd never heard of it as being deficient. Yes, of course I can tell that those aren't real violinists. Of course I can tell those are virtuos. Do I think that makes it bad? No. And that it's almost inappropriate to kind of criticize it by that metric. And so this started a line of thinking about, well, in what ways does video game music challenge normativity? And this also ties into broader questions of geek culture, about how that celebrates to a certain extent resistances against ideas of technological normative progress. That chiptune, no, we don't want your high fidelity most voices. No, we don't want that. We are being actively resistant against that.
Yeah,
Demakes.
to this day we still have both 8 and 16-bit games
Yes.
coming out that are reveling in that world.
And conventional logic says, no, you shouldn't do that. Why
Right.
would you do that? Conventional logic says, no, you shouldn't want that. You should want higher rates. You should want more voices. You should want better technologies. So it is resistant in assuming that better is faster, more powerful, all this sort of stuff. And so it ties into those sort of ideas as well. And then, so it's part of this sort of broader thing I'm thinking about a lot at the moment. And it ties into ideas of identity. And thinking about the kind of the queer culture thing, you think about the role of a lot of games, and that often I think that gaming is a haven for people, and geek culture maybe more generally, who have felt that mainstream dominant discourse about culture, and also about gender as well, don't necessarily fit for them. And certainly, as a gay person, I've also found that there's something also about certain types of anti-normativity that can be housed in games as well, and within geek culture, that is a space that can be really valuable. That's also not to say that there aren't huge issues with transphobia, with sexism within gaming circles. Of course there are, but I'm also thinking about how games can be structurally queer, can be aesthetically queer.
Yeah.
That opportunity to play, but you're also to play against, to play with. Yes, you set up a rule structure, but at the same time it encourages you to challenge those rules, to see what happens if I don't do what you want to do, to see what happens if I try something else. So these are kind of the ideas I'm thinking about at the moment. And I actually found this quotation after I wrote the chapter, the chapter we just looked at, and it was from a composer called Guy Whitmore, who did music for things like No One Lives Forever. He's quite a prolific game composer. And he said, he's talking about having written adaptive music and then listening to traditional music. And he's saying, let me find this quotation here. He says, composing and arranging adaptive music twists your brain and forces you to think linearly. I can say for certain that having written non-linear scores, I'll never think about music the same way again. It's freed my thinking about how music is put together. Even when listening to linear music, I sometimes think, this piece could easily start with this section instead of that one. Or I bet they could have started that transition 2 measures earlier. Music is malleable and only frozen when we record it. And that's a quotation I found after I wrote this chapter. Just exactly what I'm talking about. But that idea of encouraging you to think about possibilities. And then the other sort of part of this kind of queerness stuff is obviously to do with more identity in a more direct way, about music connections across worlds, about connecting with characters with very different identities to yours, those fusions that happen when we play games, the fusion between the eye of the player and the avatar. So these are the sort of ideas I'm thinking about, but they do stem from this idea of playful listening as being in somehow, and it's not a word I use in the chapter, but I think it is to do with imagining alternatives. That doesn't have to be the way it is. Things can be different, which is so ingrained with such queer thinking and queer experience.
Really
I've wrapped it
powerful.
along. Sorry, I've just spoken for like ages. Sorry.
I love it.
Wrapped
No,
a
I
little bit
love
there,
it.
but there we go.
I love in disability studies, we often talk, there are a number of models that we use. So there's, the medical model, which focuses on correction and therapy and trying to fix you to try to fit better into society. And then, of course, the social model came along and critiqued that. That was like, society has also built all these barriers, and there's onus on us to make accessible spaces, have a ramp into a building or a curb cut for a wheelchair, to get up on the curb from the street. Having text messaging for the deaf, all of these types of things. And one of the then we had this divide between kind of personal impairment and societal disabling.
Yes.
If the world doesn't have any stairs, then a wheelchair isn't disabling, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of both. And then we had a feminist turn back that sort of focused on autoethnography and kind of reclaiming impairment instead of having impairment just belong to the medical model. I promise I have a point. But my favorite model, and the one that I think can be hard to work in sometimes, is the affirmational model. And this is sort of celebrating difference and the possibilities that are opened up. So instead of just focusing on like how you're not matching up to a certain normative standard, the possibilities for the things you do that other people can't, that sort of thing. And that, to me, I'm hearing that a lot in the way that you're describing this sort of like creative, like generative process of like not only imagining but like creating an alternative. And just the possibility space. And I love that because it's not focusing on limitations. It's like a very positive, exploratory and kind of celebratory approach to like what games can do at their best. And that's not to say that the critique isn't there and isn't salient and valid and important to keep unpacking. Like you said, there's issues of sexism and transphobia and all the isms in games that need to be continually addressed. But there's also just a powerful space to identify with games as texts. And for a lot of people, even in spite of all those flaws, it doesn't manage to exclude everybody. People still play with these games even if they're not as inclusive as they could be. So to me, it suggests a possibility in progress. And
Yes, I completely agree. I tied it to something you said a little earlier, which is to do about the orchestral training and the violins, but teaching you to fit in. So what if you don't want to or can't, or that's not you? And it's about providing those opportunities for transgression and other possibilities. Again, the possibility space, the both and, not the either or.
Right.
So yeah.
And that there's often, as we've seen, folks that feel very threatened because of how deeply they're identifying with these games. If they get a sense that we're telling them like, this thing is bad, you are wrong for this thing that is such a core part of who you are. It's like that's really not the goal, but it gets misconstrued very easily because it's very personal and vulnerable for people.
Yes.
And I think it can be hard to kind of separate just because there's something problematic in this game, like it may be personally meaningful to my narrative, and it can be both. We can academics. We have an inherent space for exploring complexity. I make the joke all the time to my husband about you can never get a straightforward answer from an academic. It's always, well, it's complicated, right? It's complex. It really depends what. And like we can make fun of that to an extent, but at the same time, I think that's a really powerful thing, that we can do both. It doesn't have to be this unilateral yes or no. Games are good, games are bad. Games do this and don't do this. The point is that there's multiplicity in reception and just the way that we engage with them.
Yes, and certainly that question of being able to look at something and say this part of it is not good, or this is problematic, but I still, that's not the end of the conversation.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily have to discard it or unwrite it, from my life, just because there's something here. It may reshape that section of it. I come back to it. Oh, that hasn't aged well, something like that. But we don't have to just throw it all out either. This comes up too with kind of like Will Chang had a really good article around when a lot of the Me Too stuff was, the Harvey Weinstein and all of that, kind of talking about what do we do with the art of monstrous men, if anyone has read that. And it sort of talks about, folks trying to grapple with their own relationship to art produced by somebody who is now problematic. And my students wonder about that all the time. Well, what if, Michael Jackson was, really important to my identity, and does that music get sullied, and am I still allowed to like it? Do I have to stop listening to it? And the anxiety there, and how I try to never, first of all, never give them an answer to that. I'm like that. No, it's something that you're going to have to explore and figure out what is my relationship to the work, and how much do I divorce that? How much do I death of the author it? This comes up in gaming too. I have a lot of
Oh yeah,
folks wanting to work on Skyrim, and like that's a huge
yeah,
part
I
of
did
their
too as well.
identity. And it's like, yeah, I don't think that there's anything wrong with wanting to engage with it, but like, it may be useful to sort of like get different perspective on the game music now. Like I think if you're coming to it having never played it before in this day and age, like that may shape how you engage with it. But anyway,
Yeah,
kind of
no,
rambling a
absolutely.
bit, but just these ideas that it is complicated, and that's not just a hand wave from most of us.
No, no, and that's why because on the journal we added in relatively recently as part of the peer review process, we added in a criteria which was new, which was to do with equity, diversity, and inclusion, and it asks the reviewers to say, does this does this piece engage with these questions in an appropriate way?
Mm-hmm.
It's not saying that every article you have to write has to have a social justice perspective.
Right.
It's not saying that you can't write about certain things. Is it demonstrating an awareness?
Right.
And that's really kind of where it's appropriate.
Right.
I think,
Is there something that is really important to acknowledge or be aware of in this? Are we working on somebody that we might need a footnote to kind of
yes,
contextualize, or yeah,
yeah.
like
And that's why the Cambridge Companion has a sentence that Melly and I spent a lot of time thinking about, which is about, because there's a chapter on there there's a chapter in the Cambridge Companion about this one that uses Skyrim.
mm-hmm.
There's several that talk about Koichi Sugiyama's
Mm-hmm.
work,
Mm-hmm.
but they're useful, important historical examples.
Yeah.
And so and just saying, right, sorry, no, sorry, Ian Hart, you're out. Sorry, Elizabeth. Go
Right.
write your chapter or something else. Find something else. It's about that awareness. It's about demonstrating to people who, particularly if you are writing about work or stuff that engages and could be harmful or
Mm-hmm.
painful to people who you are of a perspective that you don't adopt, to say, no, I am aware. I
Mm-hmm.
am, I have thought about this. This is not done thoughtlessly.
And then there's a conversation with the editorial board, or whoever's involved,
Yeah,
the peer reviewers, depending on the venue.
yeah,
There should be a little bit of back and forth just
yeah.
to figure that out, and maybe there's a content warning or a trigger warning depending on how intense. We have a couple in our book that have some
Mm,
content warnings,
mm,
and this was after Routledge told us, oh, we're going to kind of market this text pedagogically for maybe folks to use as an undergraduate seminar
yeah.
text or something like that. So doesn't mean that every chapter has to be, sanitized, or
No,
that you
no.
can't have any that are a little more challenging in the language, but overall try to aim for a little bit of accessibility. And that was something that we made sure to foreground, saying, there is one that deals with some pretty intense topics involving sexual assault. So, and there already was a good trigger warning, but we worked on the language of that. We're making sure that it's in the introduction as well, like so it's not just at the moment of the actual chapter, it's also
Yes.
foregrounded in other places. And it's useful work, and we don't have
Yeah.
to shy away from something just because it's problematic. Heaven knows we still teach Wagner.
Indeed, I've
Heaven
got a piece
knows.
coming out about another piece coming out about Wagner actually very soon about.
Yeah, and actually you have a Wagner in video games article that
Yeah, I can't stop talking about Wagner. And Wagner and the erotics. Is it tied into some of the things he's talking about? Actually, it's about Wagner and erotics.
mm,
I'm going back to talk about the Dig again, which is just a lovely game with beautiful music. But going back to where we started this conversation, I think this is where the community aspect is really important, because it's very important that I think that we are able to have those honest conversations where if somebody is writing something that could be said to be problematic, or needs to be made aware of something, that we are in a community that can do that. Where if you see something that I've written, or say that I'm about to do, or whatever, or you just have concerns, that you're able to come and talk to me and say, hey Tim, just to be aware, is this on your radar? Did you know
mm-hmm,
about this?
mm-hmm.
Have you thought about that? And to be accessible as a community and be open to criticism, to be better together. And this is where I think we have to be very careful that you are not your work, which is something that
Yes.
academics are terrible at doing.
Musicians
Um,
too, right? It's very
yeah,
on the one hand, we are trained in just constant criticism of ourselves and by our teachers and everything, but there's a vulnerability there where it can be really hard to go into, like a recital class format, or something where you're performing in front of your studio, and then they're giving you comments. That's a lot of folks struggle with that, even at the very highest levels. So we are very bad at because it's a part of our identity. We're working on games that we have a lot of love for generally. I mean, I guess I have looked at games that weren't a huge part of my life growing. The Cleopatra chapter was like that, but the Egyptology was a big part of me.
Yes.
And kind of learning to separate that out. And I always tell people I'm not very precious about my writing. Like I am while I'm crafting it, and I try to, I have my little moments where I do something that I think is kind of poetically useful or whatever, where I just like the turn of phrase and I like it. But at the same time, when somebody critiques it, I've kind of entrusted it to people that I really trust. So like if I hand off a chapter to Will Gibbons, and I know he's going to come back and he's not going to coddle me or try to protect my ego by saying, oh, it's great. If it's not great, like I trust that he's going to prevent me from putting it out there when it's not where it should be. And the only way to get there is you have to actively cultivate a relationship. And it's so different from viewing, the classic view of networking is this very transactional, like, oh, this person's a big name in the field. I'm going to get to know them, and then they're going to open up this door for me. Yes, there are possibilities. You get invited to do something in an edited collection, for example, and those relationships matter, but they matter on a human level, and they matter in terms of promoting rigor in the field. It can be very hard if you don't know someone very well to kind of bring them in and have them trust, like, this is coming from a good place. Like, it is not a reflection of, like, okay, you did something problematic in your paper. It does not mean that, like, I'm writing you off as a person. Like, this is an opportunity, but that can be really hard. And I think a lot of us are maybe scared to like do that pulling aside. So I think it's again, just cultivate community, cultivate relationships.
Yes, and it's not about yeah, completely, and it's not about being snide at somebody on Twitter,
Right.
After the paper. It's go talk to them. We're all humans, and
shoot them an email.
Yes,
I've gotten really beautiful ones from Neil Lerner in the past, in like good, pointing out things that I didn't get to, and he never assumed that, like, I hadn't read something. It was never like, oh, you're dumb, you missed this. It was always just like, oh, you didn't speak to this, but, like, in case this is useful, here's this. Or he's pointed out, I use this example all the time in terms of just, like, growth and just my gratitude for relationships, because I think at one point I referred to something as lame in that kind of, like, 90s way. And then he sort of, like, reminded me, like, hey, that's actually, ableist. Because in my head, I was a 90s kid. Like, that term was ubiquitous.
Absolutely.
And sort of recognizing, like, oh, okay, yeah. And let me think about, how do I want to replace, and it doesn't mean that I'm going to sit here in all of my non-academic relationships, like, pointing it out to every single person. Like, it mattered that it was in that setting where we were hanging out after a conference. It wasn't anything too formal, but that it was happening among colleagues, and that he got me thinking about, I could start modeling, different word choices and kind of breaking myself of a habit where I can replace that.
Yes. I've tried to replace crazy.
That one I think is really difficult. That comes up a lot when we're replacing terms. Something like lame, I think we can kind of get around. There's not, like, a single word that works, because it kind of depends on the context in which you're critiquing whatever the thing is. But yeah, crazy can be really difficult for people, because it's kind of used positively and negatively. Like,
I go with wild.
Wild is one that I like to use a lot. Just to kind of, there's an element of using it to indicate surprise at something.
Yes.
Kind of humorously or otherwise, or sometimes very negative, but so just kind of indicating the surprise in that moment. But yeah, it's like, I'm grateful that he pointed that out, because again, that was if you watch any 90s films, like teen films, it's everywhere. It was just a real common affectation. And a lot of us just said it without really interrogating where it comes from. And again, it doesn't mean that I'm just going to go on this rampage and like go after every single family member who anytime they use it. I think there's a time and place to get into that with people, but sometimes those moments do open up where you can be like, oh yeah, I've actually replaced this in my own vocabulary, and here's what I went to, and then that tends to be a little more receptive.
We're all on the journey.
We're all on the journey,
and we're there to help each other. You know, we're not here to.
And I just hope that we continue. You know, I think we're both in a lot of spaces where we get to interact with newcomers to the field, or sort of continue cultivating relationships with folks that are already in, where it's like we want to be inclusive and you know, make this a really unique space even within music scholarship. And I think a lot of people have said that it feels different than other pockets of music scholarship. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that we can't ever critique one another.
Indeed.
But I think there's a recognition of like, how do we do that? You know, like there's a responsible way to do that where the other person knows that it's coming from a place of care. And not just some kind of like smug one-upsmanship, you know. Like, no, I genuinely care about this. I care about you. I want this to be received well, even outside of the field, you know. So when you know, if you're citing Robert Hatton, you miss something really big, and like, what if Robert Hatton sees it and then is like, oh, this person didn't understand my work at all? Like, you don't want those kind of misconceptions, or where people go, oh, those video game scholars aren't rigorous at all, like their work is terrible. It's like we're watching out for each other, but it is when you get to a point where you're like actively seeking that out. Like, here's my work, it is vulnerable to do that, but like here it is, please help me rip it apart so that I can fix it and make sure that it doesn't go out into the world before it's ready. Once you get out of grad school, you don't have that advisor that sometimes is doing that for you.
I think that is one of the trickiest things, actually, is that moment of transition, which is why edited collections are, as you sort of alluded to earlier, edited collections are really useful to provide that guidance. But also the people in our field are, you know, and when you go for reviews for journals, you know, that you can trust the editors to be fair with the review, to that they're going to find appropriate people, and that they themselves will kind of be ready to. We've not had to do this with JSMG, but be there to, you know, edit reviews. You know, we've not had nasty reviews back from anybody at JSMG because we choose lovely people to review the work. But, you know, we are ready to stand in and to edit reviews if they're coming back and we don't think they're right or they're saying things that are inappropriate. We'll step in and sort it. We've got to. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's nice to have the multiple points of view and say, like, even if this person is kind of harping on this thing, you know, that's just that particular reviewer wants to see certain things in a work, and maybe you have a totally different methodology. Like,
it's totally fine.
You know, maybe they're telling you they want a transcription and you're Will Gibbons and you hate transcription. He says he's allergic to transcriptions. We were joking about that on the streams that he's been on, but you know, if somebody was throwing that at Will, like, the editors could come in and be like, do you just want that because that's what you do? Like, is this the version of this isn't a question but a comment, you know, where it really is, this is the paper as I would have wanted to do it, and not actually as you would have wanted to do it. So it is nice to have the editors to be in there, like, you know, the Tetris article, I got some, not like, well, I actually did get a pretty negative review on that from the peer review. And I went to my advisor because I was just like, it was to me, it was that the two were very unbalanced. If they had both been very negative or both been very positive, but it was the mismatch that the one was like, this is, you know, awful or whatever. I think unpublishable trash was used. Like, there was a real nasty phrase in one of the reviews, but then the other one was like, this is great, here's just a few little things. And so I went to my advisor and I was like, what do I do with the mean one? I don't want to not speak to it, but like, and he sort of showed me, like, it can be really hard because it's hurtful, but you have to like find the constructive, like, is there, you know, try to just step back and take the emotions out of it and figure out, like, how do I respond to this? But it's nice when we don't have to work through that layer, and we can see the constructive criticism coming across without the tone being so nasty too. It saves a step. It makes it a little better.
I completely agree. I had absolutely awful reviews when I submitted a book to a publisher once, and it said things like, "Oh, this person shows no evidence of any musical understanding or any musicological training." It was really just nasty.
Yikes.
And it doesn't help.
Yeah, and
it doesn't help. It didn't help at all. It didn't help me.
I had a comment in my comps like that where I failed a Bach essay because it was about chorales, and instead of the music that I had actually interacted with as a violinist, which is all the orchestral stuff, the suites, Brandenburg and organ music and all that stuff. So I didn't really have a good, and nor did when I took music history, it's like we talked about Lutherans briefly, and then it was like here's Ein Festeburg, and then we kind of moved on. So I really didn't have a lot of exposure to it, and then we had to do these meetings after.
Right.
Actually, it wasn't really comps in the sense of it wasn't like ABD comps, but we did these first year exams at OSU that were, do you know your music history? And you have to sit down and go through everything you got wrong with the professors. And the person that did that one said, well, clearly you know nothing about Bach. It was like, you have to bite your lip because it's like, I've played all of the sonatas and partitas on recitals. Like, of course I've interacted with plenty of Bach music. It was just like, yes, you've obviously uncovered a lacuna, and I fully admit that I didn't know anything about Lutheran music. And that's fine. And I learn and I retake the exam and I study up on it, and it all worked out. But like in the moment, it was like, ouch.
Yeah, that's not necessary.
And you don't want to be told you know nothing about whatever. Like
that's bad teaching. I'm calling that. That's bad
well, my advisor said he described, what did he said it was kind of like hazing, in that
something which is also not okay. But
yeah, but in this sense of just like breaking you down, like getting to recognize that there are limits to everything, that first year mentality as the grad student of like, oh, look at me, like I'm so smart, I know all the things, and that these exams make you confront how little you know, and that as you get further and further, you kind of know less and less because your knowledge base narrows instead of broadens in some way. Like you become an expert on the one specific spot instead of remembering every single piece you covered in music history in undergrad across all of history. Like you're gonna have weaker eras, and to this day the Baroque is one of mine. And that's fine, that's fine. I have a definite love of the earlier stuff and the later stuff. And then I have decent exposure to the, classical romantic as a performer, but not much depth beyond that. And like, that's fine. We have our areas. But I remember him saying like, this is the upperclassman putting your head in the toilet and you just got to let them flush. I was like, cool. Cool.
All right. I just want to make a comment to Dr. Greg in the chat saying about, I mean, I'm a big fan of transcriptions. I like them very much. But I'm happy. I suppose perhaps when I come to transcription, I'm perhaps less. I'm more of a. I don't necessarily then feel the need to do huge sort of analytical treatment of it. I'm happy to do light transcription. So I'm a big fan of transcription.
And we know that I'm heavy transcription. If we saw last week, we know I had 20 some transcriptions in that Cleopatra chapter. Like I was all transcription. So your approach, I mean, everybody's coming to it with a different background, and like your background is making up your expertise, and it's what gives you a unique voice in the field. So yeah, having a performer background, having all this transcription background, like that informs the kind of work that I do, I think, for the better. It's like I'm the right person to do the work that I do because I come to it with the skill set, and I'm not trying to do the kind of work that doesn't resonate with my experiences and my whatever expertise I can claim to have. So it's more about the idea of like, if that isn't your mode, Kate saying transcription will be a drawing. I don't have a transcription ear. A lot of the work Kate doesn't need a transcription. It's so effective because of the ways that like Kate is dealing with eco-criticism and, soundscape analysis. And a lot of that can't be notated musically. But that, it's like Kate's work. It's like, why would we try to put the square peg in the round hole here and be like, you need a transcription of this? Like, it has to serve a function. So if you're going to ask for a transcription, like it's really because, you're really talking about this and you're using a lot of prose to describe it. And this might be a shorthand that might help you talk through something. Like there's got to be a reason for you to, we were talking about this with the Ocarina of Time book. It's not just let's transcribe every single piece in the game and put it in this book. There had to be a good reason. There had to be, let me explicate everything that's in that. So that I'm not just describing, okay, it's a B and then it goes to an A and then you don't want to describe every single note by note, but if you have that, then you can use that and get to the more interesting analysis. So
yes, and just as long as your method and your evidence and your claims all match up, then you can, whatever rocks, really, it's all fine.
Yeah, we want there to be a synthesis here. We want the what do they say in the sciences? They talk about the like a congruity of the actual data collected and then your interpretation of it, that you want it to kind of all flow and have a reason.
Yes.
It's not just based on nothing. And that's why you use specific measures and methodologies. And it's the same thing in our field. It's like we don't just put the transcription in just to have it. Also, I think publishers are generally wary of, let's just put in 18 screenshots. Like, really pick and choose the best ones. It's like quotation. You don't want to overly quote all of the literature just to prove that you've read it. You need to kind of be thoughtful. And my advisor always got on me about that. Like, you love quotation. I do. I love, to this day, I always have to curb my lit review. And really think about, what can't I live without? Like, what do I really need for my point? Can I just signpost this work exists, for more on this, see this? Versus having to bring it all with me and plop it into the current paper. So anyway, this was a long digression on life in general. But your queer work's kind of going in many places, but one of them is our upcoming gender book, right? Some of this is going to show up in our book.
It's a mess at the moment. It is a delightful queer mess of stuff. I'm still teasing out the threads of
what's
things.
Going to go where.
So goodness, I mean,
but it seems like this is going to be a direction that's going to lead to a lot of different things. So it's exciting.
Yes, and I didn't want to do that. I think it was important to me. It wasn't the sort of, that simplistic thing of kind of, oh, I'm gay. I know I'll write about queer stuff. That seems like a good idea. Why not? Yeah, let's get on that bandwagon. It had to be, it was something I really wanted to kind of, be thoughtful about. I think there is sometimes a problem with people using queer theory to just be a bit of a trendy term. So I think it does need to be used carefully.
A lot of identity does that. Let's throw a disability studies angle in here because that's what's popular right now.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally. And at the same point in time, it's like in our book too, we don't want to be like, oh, we're gonna ask someone to write about queer theory just because they're gay, right? Like, because you don't want to feel like you're tokenizing anyone. At the same time, it's like we want those perspectives, and we want to make sure that we do the ask in a way that opens up somebody to do the kind of work that they want to do as it relates to the topic. But there is a balance there where it's just like, we want to have diverse voices. We want to make sure that we don't just have all American scholars, and that we have a really wide range of topics. But it doesn't mean that, like, if you want to work on like the trans experience, that you necessarily have to be trans. But it does mean that there's going to be a layer there of really thinking through kind of the, how are you deploying this literature, and are you doing your due diligence with the work, just as we've seen with white people working on hip hop and things like that. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that there is an additional layer that we have to be really thoughtful and have good conversations and make sure that people are looking at it and just making sure that we're doing work really respectfully and responsibly, and not putting out things that are going to cause further problems and marginalization, right?
Yeah.
So,
and of course, I'm writing here and speaking, I'm a Welsh, very white person, and so even particularly as this light is fading here, it's even illuminating.
The white shirt too, just kind of brightens up.
This sort of theme Disney pride thing. But yes, so absolutely. absolutely. I fear on the theme of fading light, I may have to.
Yes, we should
depart,
let you enjoy the
unfortunately, at
rest
this
of your
late
evening, as
age.
it were. But
this has been
so
delightful. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's extremely kind. Thank you to all the people who are tuning in. I
yes,
hope
and I know
I had a great time. So thank you very, very much.
we always have a lot on the VOD too, and I will be uploading all of them to YouTube as well.
Lovely.
I sort of got in my head that I wanted to recaption everything, but with the length of the videos, I think I'm just going to have to live with Nakvagum getting captioned however YouTube decides it. That's the one in particular. It's like NACKVUHGUM, and I'm like, folks won't know what that is, but that's okay. We'll just live with it. It's more important for folks to have access to the VOD, and if they have questions about any of that. But yeah, I've looked into. It's obvious why transcription services are so expensive, but the only one I'm going to try to fix is the Wombat art abstract review. That one I want to make sure that like that can be a permanent resource that just it doesn't have terrible transcriptions of people's names and everything. Other than that, I may have to just be okay with it, or work on things in chunks and improve little bits at a time. But anyway, we will get the VOD up. A lot of people watched there, and we will hopefully have you on again because maybe we'll do that ritual.
Oh, we could have fun with that.
Paper,
that's Kentucky Route Zero, which is a game again I can't stop talking about.
Oh, Pete would be all over that. Because Pete's also worked on that game.
And his stuff's great on that too.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much for just your general being. You are just a delightful human, and I just feel very lucky to know you. I always enjoy anytime we've interacted when we've been on panels together, being at conferences. I enjoy talking to you. I enjoy your perspective. Everything you write is brilliant. I've loved everything that's come out, and I utilize it so much in my work and my teaching, and it's great to just talk about the field too, and just like all the possibilities and the space that we're trying to cultivate through Ludo and Nakvagum and JSMEG and all of these different edited collections, the work that we're trying to do to make this space really vibrant and unique in musicology. So thank you for fighting the good fight, doing the good work.
Thank you. Thank you for doing these. It's extremely generous of you to spend your time doing this. Thank you very, very much indeed. And for all the work that you do, it's always a tremendous pleasure to be working with you and for your wonderful research. So yeah, thank you for doing all this. And thank you for the people joining online as well. It's very, very nice.
Glad you all joined us. Next week, I think it's Stephen Armstrong, right?
That was Stephen.
Also JSMEG, a lot of JSMEG articles. This is the Sounding the Grind JRPG battle music, which is a classic. So I'm really glad, and that will be next week. So
I should also say, if anyone wants to contact me, please absolutely feel free to do so. I work at Royal Holloway, University of London. I'm very findable. My email address is out there if you go to my university page. So do feel free to contact me. I'm always very, very, very happy to hear from people or whatever. So, or do get in touch if you want to talk or just want other things or need a copy of the chapter or whatever. Do just get in touch with me.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to pop your email in the chat really quick before we
go
down?
Yes, I'm very happy to do that. I just didn't know if that was a bad idea for any reason or not, but I'm absolutely happy to do that. Spell. That's my name. There we go. I better join. I'm not logged in actually to my own account.
Okay.
This is going to take ages. Sorry.
No worries. No worries. We can always post in the Discord or elsewhere. But yes, enjoy your evening. Thank you for being here. Always a delight. We'll see you all next time. Bye.